They howl at the moon, and they make you wet yourself from the mere sight of them in Hollywood films. Even though there's rarely any more werewolf movies coming out, do not let that fool you. Real-life dogmen and werewolves lurk the American countryside and beyond, feasting on animals on the side of the road and often stalking those who find themselves alone in the woods. What you are about to hear are allegedly real eyewitness accounts of werewolves in the woods. If you have a story that you'd like narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org. Los Angeles Werewolf from Vedic. The story takes place in Covina, California, which is 20 minutes east of Los Angeles and 20 minutes south of Azusa Canyons in the San Gabriel Valley mountain range. This story spans from when I was 5 years old till just the other night. My first sighting was when I was 5 years old. I was lying in bed one night during a heavy rainstorm. My father was in the living room catching some late-night TV. I remember minding my own business when suddenly my bedroom window shattered into a million tiny pieces. I don't remember much besides running out of the room and screaming for my mother and father. But years later, they would tell me that I was screaming, "Werewolf, werewolf." How creepy is that? Well, I would end up recovering some of these memories around the time I was 29. It was after a very vivid nightmare. I woke up in sweat with these images in my head that were all too vivid. I remember seeing it through the shattered window, standing higher than the eaves of the house. It had to crouch down to look at me through the window frame because it was so tall. It had these long, pointed ears, a muscular build concealed by thick fur, and long, sharp teeth. 10 years later, at the age of 15, I was lying in bed. This would have been back in the 90s before wireless headphones and Bluetooth were even a thing. My wired headphones couldn't reach my bed, so I got bundled up on the floor so I could listen to music while I went to sleep. Keep in mind that my window was always kept about 4 inches open. This was because I enjoyed the night air. Our home was a one-story house, my room being ground level with a view of the front lawn. I started to fall asleep, so I removed my headphones, and the moment I did, my eyes shot wide open and my heart began to pound. This feeling of terror came over me out of nowhere. That's when I began to hear the sound of clicking claws on hardwood, like something was racing across the porch. Whatever it was coming fast. It sounded like it was on all fours. I could then hear it enter the yard, walking around on grass and dirt. It was then that the sounds of its footsteps changed. They were less frequent, as if it was walking on 2 legs instead of 4. But it was still so heavy that every footstep sort of shook the window pane. It slowed down to an almost standstill in front of my window. I could hear its heavy, slow breathing. It sounded absolutely huge. I got this strong feeling that if I looked over at it past the blinds and witnessed it for myself, that it would have license or permission to come inside and take me. Now, my grandmother's room was down the hall. She was all into God and angels, and I wasn't. But I felt that if I was just in her presence, I would be safe from this thing. So I swallowed hard, took a big breath, and I bolted out of the floor, through the door, and down the hall, moving faster than I ever had before to make it to my grandmother's room. But halfway there, I stood frozen. My heart was pounding out of my chest still, but I didn't hear anything come through my window after me. So I waited for a moment or two. before slowly and quietly making my way back to my room, seeing that whatever was at the window was no longer there. I stayed up that night calling my friend and telling her about the event. Back in high school, as a guy, I never wanted to share these topics with my male peers. I thought I'd look crazy, but oddly enough, my female friends were a lot more open-minded about it. So, to a female friend's comfort, I went. Nothing else would happen, not until a year after. About a year after that, around the same season the previous encounter came in, it happened again and went down almost the exact same way. I was bundled up in the floor, window cracked, headphones in, and something stopped at my window, letting me hear it walk around and breathe. I would run once again to my grandmother's room, but nothing would be at my window when I went back. Another year passed by, and again, about the same season, I had yet another encounter. But this time, I remembered the past 2 years, so I immediately closed my window when I heard his claws clacking. I was in bed this time, not on the floor. Later that night, though, I awoke to the sounds of thuds. It sounded like those heavy footsteps again, this time more deliberate, as if it was trying to wake me up and get my attention. The following morning, I ran to my window, only to find my window screen clawed in half from one side to the next. I was horrified. This was the first time since my childhood encounter that it had tried to get in. 3 years later, I was working a warehouse job. I worked the swing shift and wouldn't get home until 1:30 a.m. That particular night, I came home and went out into the backyard to unwind. I enjoyed the late night air and the view of the trees and the wind. I went out the back door to sit on the porch. I looked out to the tool shed nearby, only to find 2 green, reflecting eyes staring at me. The moment I saw them, my heart seemed to stop, and so did my breathing. I thought that I must have been seeing things, so I slowly backed back onto the porch to where I could no longer see the glowing green eyes. But I stepped forward again to see that they were still there, and they were following my every footstep for as long as they could see me. When they blinked, I got this strong feeling that I needed to get back inside immediately. So I did. Nothing else would happen until another 20 years later. It was only 3 weeks ago, as of writing this. I was out in the backyard again, when out of nowhere, I smelled this strong stench of body odor. I could not locate where it was coming from. I was sitting alone at the time. It wasn't long before, following that odor, there was a low, long, and guttural growling noise. It sounded far but close at the same time. We had a bunch of storage boxes on the patio at the time, and I was on the other side of those boxes, but I didn't wait around. I bolted inside immediately, leaving my phone, charger, backpack, and vape pen. I didn't go back out until daylight. The funny thing is, this really got me into researching and reading about werewolves. And at one time, I found a passage that read that the transition from man to wolf can only occur once a year. This was creepy to read because those first 3 experiences, they happened the same season every year. It was like clockwork. It was a hard realization to come to, but I do think these creatures exist. They're real. Be careful. From SaucyDrago. It was August of 2017. My family and I were visiting my home country, Russia. We were going to go visit my grandma at her farm. My grandpa had passed away 2 years before this, and my grandma had gotten better from the incident, but we wanted to see her to bring her some joy in her life. Her farm had a barn, a stable, and a big plot of land for plants. There were also 2 buildings, a place where we cook and store food, and then a place where we sleep and usually hang out at. This farm is surrounded by woods. Now, this country has quite a bit of wolves here. I've even seen a few come onto the property a couple of times. I've heard stories of werewolves too, and other creatures that live in Europe, but I never once imagined that they would be real. It was the day before we would go back home, and after hanging out with my family, I decided to go to bed, catch up on some videos on my phone. I laid there for a good hour watching videos until it was around 11 p.m. I decided to go to sleep. When I was just on the verge of passing out, I heard a loud shriek coming from the forest, followed by 2 shots. That was normal, as people would often put animals down out here. But this felt off. I waited until I heard the most disturbing howl erupt in the night's air. I lay there frozen while many thoughts ran through my head. Then slowly I began to hear something outside. At first I thought it was a stray cat, but it was much too heavy for that. My room has a door with a big glass pane in the middle, so I could see outside. And there I saw it. A creature covered in fur. It looked like a buff wolf, but stood much taller than me. It crouched down, and I could see its face. Its teeth were big and sharp, and they were covered in red stains. It looked like it had just eaten. The creepiest part were its eyes, which were human in shape and appearance. But there was an evilness to it. When it saw that I was there, it turned to leave, but not before turning to give me what appeared to be a demonic smile or snarl. Nothing like that since has ever chilled me so much. There are things out there we yet don't understand, so even if you're skeptic, it's best to be cautious and careful when you're outdoors. There are things lurking in the forests and the wild that will leave you defenseless and in shock. The Thing in the Woods, from Lemmer. I was in grade 6. We were on a school trip for the week, all us grade 6ers and about 4 teachers. We had a really great time overall. There was this girl named Armanda. I always had a crush on her, but she never reciprocated her feelings. Still, I wanted her attention so badly that I would do anything for it. So I figured I'd pull the old "I'm gonna pretend to be sad and upset so that you can come ask what's wrong" thing. It was pretty childish. Then again, I was a child. But after this failed to work, I ended up deciding to be a loner for this trip. The place we stayed at was huge. There were these 50 little cabins on the side of a mountain, surrounded by trees. These cottages were uphill, so you had to go down a little brick trail to the bottom where the pool area was. There were swings and tennis courts all over, all of which were right next to the tree line. It was about 7:30 p.m. In South Africa, the sun is almost set that time in October. I walked down to the pool to chill on the swings and felt sorry for myself because I still couldn't get the attention of the girl I liked. I sat down on one of the swings, but I didn't start swinging. I just put my toes on the ground and gently pushed myself so that the swing lightly tilted forwards and backwards. I wanted to listen to some music, so I got out my old Sony Ericsson. You know, the one that was white and orange with speakers both at the top and bottom of the phone. I went to my music library and started listening to some music. Black Parade began playing, and about 2 minutes into the song, I heard another sound outside of the music. a crack in the tree line about 10 meters away from me. I looked around me, but I didn't see what made the noise. But I turned down the volume a little bit, as I was kind of getting paranoid. I was a smaller kid, alone near the woods, and it was getting dark after all. I mean, there wasn't really anything to be afraid of because South Africa didn't have the dangerous animals near where I was. We didn't have wolves or bears either. Sure, there were lions, but they were located 1,500 kilometers away from where this happened. I knew I shouldn't have been in danger, but something felt very wrong. I heard something again and jerked my head up real fast to see what it may have been. I knew I definitely wasn't alone there anymore. As soon as I looked up, I heard a few twigs snapping like something was trying to hide. I stood up and I was about to leave, but I kept my eyes on the woods in front of me where I had heard the noise. I scanned the area to see if I could spot anything. About 30 meters away, it slowly came out of the bushes, not taking its eyes off me, while it was slowly moving towards me. At first, I could see that it appeared to be a dog. No, it was a wolf, I told myself. But this wolf was as big as a lion, and when I saw the human-like features on its face, like a flatter snout and what appeared to be lips, I was ready to scream. The thing stopped for a moment. As it stared at me, it rose to 2 legs, as if it wanted to both mimic me and scare me. It looked me in the eyes. I was too afraid to run then. I knew that it knew I was scared. It stood about 6 feet tall and was quite thin, and its fur was solid white. It didn't look very intimidating, besides the uncanny valley of its appearance. But the longer I stared at it, the more horrified I was. It had dog-like legs with the knees bending backwards, yet it stood like a man. It even had a moderately fluffy tail, stiff and angled upward. Its arms were more human-like though, ending with person-like digits. Its upper lip was curled up, and it was snarling at me, revealing very sharp teeth. It seemed somewhat cautious, yet I knew that I was the prey. Its eyes were almond brown, like a dog's eyes. I didn't move a muscle still, and we stared at each other for probably 2 minutes, each of us waiting for the other to make the first move. But it seemingly gave up on me. It went back down on all 4s, turned its head toward the woods, then walked away, disappearing into the brush. I was scared stiff. I had to basically force my body to move again, after which I backed up, still facing the forest. When I hit the slope, I had to go slowly. I was still too afraid to turn around. I hadn't seen it again yet, and I was beginning to get comfortable. But then, about 40 meters back, I saw it emerge from the woods again, on all 4s. It came out into the open, fully onto the grass. It was watching me back away. I knew this was it. I was going to get torn to shreds by some wolf-like monster. Yet the thing stood up, looked at me, went down on all 4s again, then once more disappeared into the woods. Why was it doing this? Did it just want to observe me? I turned and ran then back up to the houses. I broke down in front of my little cottage house, where a couple of the other kids asked what was wrong with me. I admitted it flat out. I said that I'd seen a monster in the woods. Some laughed, some wanted to know more, some called me crazy. After 2 minutes or so, I actually realized what just happened, and I really started crying then. Now, 10 years later, I still wish they would have believed me. If only they knew the horrors that exist in this world just beyond the tree line. A Werewolf in Davie from Morgan 1310. I've only shared this story to my husband and son before this. To this day, I try to tell myself that I imagined it, but 23 years later, it's still as fresh in my mind as the night it happened. I was dating a guy who lived in Davie, Florida. It was 23 years ago. Davie was the boondocks of Broward County. It was all mini ranches and cattle grazing land. I mean, the Burger King there still had hitching posts for horses. It was country to a suburb dweller like me. We lived down a dirt road, paved now, off Griffin Road, living at the guy's house, who was set up at a couple of acres that backed up to a pasture land. There were no streetlights, and when we pulled into his driveway, not even the front porch light was on. But the moon was full and lit up the yard that night, so much so that I could see all the way to the tree line, which separated his front yard from the cattle property next door. I'll admit, I've always had a fear of the dark, so the idea of staying in the car while he ran into the house was not appealing to me, but I didn't get along with his mother, so I'd rather stay outside. I watched him unlock the side door, then head into the house. He would be back soon, he said. Through the Florida room window, I saw him stop and chat with his mom and dad. 5 minutes go by, then another 5, and I'm starting to get annoyed. He was supposed to simply run in the house and get something from his room, then run back out. But no, he's bellied up to their bar, just chatting away. So, mustering my mental fortitude to deal with his mother, I took one last look around the yard before I opened the door and stepped out. I'm glad I checked first. Just as I had opened the door and put my foot out, I noticed the trees shaking over by the tree line. I stared at the spot, thinking it was a cow breaking through the fence. Then I noticed it was on 2 legs and was very tall. It stopped on the edge of the trees, right at the line separating my boyfriend's yard from the pasture, bathed in moonlight. It was almost like a wolf, on 2 legs, pure white and built like a human, but it was covered in fur and had the head of a wolf. Judging by the trees, it was about 7 feet tall, eyes glowing green. I froze. I'd never understood the term paralyzed with fear until that very moment. I literally could not move. I could barely breathe. Turning my head was out of the question. I couldn't even bring myself to pull my leg back into the car. I could only stare at what my frantic mind was telling me was a werewolf. It was sniffing the air like it was trying to catch a scent. Was it trying to catch mine? Did it know that I was there? How could what I be seeing actually exist? I did not know what to do. It was maybe 100 feet away from me where I sat, cowering in the car. The front door of the house was only 25 feet away, but I couldn't decide whether to try to outrun it to the house or to stay in this car. Then I thought, what if my boyfriend comes out while that thing is watching? Should I honk the horn and try to scare it away? All of this happened so fast. It felt like 20 minutes, but it must have been under 60 seconds or so. I had just broken out of my fear and paralysis. I slid my foot slowly back into the car. When I did, that creature dropped down on all 4s, then just ran away back the way it came. I sat there staring where it had been standing, trembling now. I didn't even realize my boyfriend had come out and gotten back in the car until he spoke from behind me. "Oh, babe, what's wrong with you?" He said that I looked as pale as a ghost. I couldn't tell him what I had just seen because I could barely believe it myself. So I just mumbled that I thought that I'd seen something and it scared me. I slept with my lights on for the next year after that, convinced it was going to come find me, like it knew my scent. I also to this day can't watch any movies with werewolves in them. When I began dating my now husband, he wanted me to watch the Underworld series with him. but I kept telling him no. Werewolves scared the crap out of me, but he kept insisting, saying, "You know they don't exist, right? You love zombie and vampire movies." So I had to tell him this story, and to his credit, he didn't call me crazy or even disbelieve me. He did, however, coerce me into watching the movie, and let me tell you, the first time William Corvinus showed up on screen as the big white wolf, I screamed so loud and hid my face under a throw pillow. Whoever conceptualized that design for the wolf got it spot on. Wolf of Alberta, from Ylvana W. I grew up in Penticton, British Columbia, and moved to Alberta back in 2012. I'm now a senior in high school. My friends and I have always been interested in the occult, as we practice weekly at one another's homes. But one particular summer, I had quite the terrifying experience. I was walking my dog Chew, who is a German Shepherd Amstaff mix. It was a normal summer night. Everyone was in their homes partying away or sleeping for work the next day. The moon was not full, rather it was a waxing crescent. I live in a half-wooded, half-suburban neighborhood where we get bobcat sightings and coyote sightings every few days, so you learn to fend them off or ignore them, as they usually mind their own business. But what my dog and I saw that night was no bobcat, or a coyote, or even a wolf. As I was saying, my dog Chew and I were walking our normal route near my little brother's school, when I saw that a deal, if you know what I'm talking about, was going down in the school parking lot. I diverted my path into the nearby field. It was there that we saw it. Something that defied my comprehension. There was a dark looming figure with only some moonlight hitting its body. It wasn't as tall as the typical accounts of werewolves or dogmen, but about the average height of a fully grown man, 5'10" to 6 feet, I'd say. Its eyes seemed to be blank. Not animalistic though. Its eyes were the most human thing about it. My dog started growling and launching himself towards the thing. When it saw us and heard us, it began to creep closer. The odd thing is, I felt at ease during this experience, as if this thing wasn't something I should be afraid of. I pulled my dog back, trying to calm him down while keeping eye contact with the creature. When the dog finally quieted down, the beast turned away, and that's when its silhouette was truly highlighted by the moon. Its build was average, and it had a face that seemed distorted. But those teeth, those were something you definitely should have been afraid of. What really shocked me about this thing was this beast did not come after me or my dog. It just left us alone and walked away, even if the sight of those teeth told me that it could rip me into pieces in seconds. I'm still not sure if it was a werewolf or something else, but I swear, every time I walk that same route, I feel that something is watching me. Maybe it's paranoia due to walking at night, but maybe it's my instincts telling me to avoid that area. They are the violence of Mother Nature incarnate. They are a tempest of fangs and fur. They prowl the woods, looking for the next victim, looking for some prey to fill their bellies. You could be their next appetizer if you don't fear the woods properly. If you find yourself alone in the middle of the night under a bright full moon, you're already dead. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode of Darkness Prevails, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you want your story narrated on the show, send it to us at darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails to donate, or shop our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous episode, about 5 unexplained creatures seen on Native American land. SK Anarchy 69 says, "Do some scary stories from priests." Scary priests? or scary stories from priests, I think I might find plenty of both. Homer McIE says, been sick and this makes me happy. Get yourself some warm tea, lay on the couch with some blankets, and enjoy the show. Luke G says, yes, first comment. Love this channel and your work. Keep it up. Well, you were almost first, but YouTube likes to tease you, so congrats. Pagan Thought says, felt cute. Might eat your family and mimic their voices later. I don't know. I hope you do. Then tell me how they taste. And Sir Lucas says, Native Americans are pretty cool. You got that right. Anyone who can make legends like these, I'm happy to know. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, because more scary stories are on the way soon. So stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're awesome people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.